Good afternoon. Sorry to cut you off there. My name is David Severance. If you don't know me, I'm one of the coaches here at Chirag Shah Coaching. I'm the Chief Learning Officer here, and I'm holding Chirag's seat warm for him while he's on the road today. So delighted to have all of you with us. Good afternoon, good morning. Today, we're going to continue the conversation from yesterday. If you were with us yesterday, we were talking about how to communicate your value to buyers. One of the most important skills that you need to develop real capacity and mastery of as we go forward, especially given all the legal stuff that's going on. But no less than important is your ability to communicate your value to sellers. So you can think of this as an extension of yesterday's conversation. So we're going to do what we did yesterday, which was Chirag has recorded a video. Yesterday afternoon, he recorded this video. We'll see here in just a minute. The video is about 15 minutes long. So he'll be talking about how to communicate value to sellers. Please take some notes, and then after that, we'll continue the conversation live. I'd like to especially point out that, while you listen to him talk about how he approaches this stuff, think carefully about how is that different from what you do? What is different about his philosophy and how he brings himself to this conversation with the clients in a way that's different from you? And or think about how he phrases things or how, what his tactics are in doing this. And after the video, I'll ask you to just put into the chat, whatever it is that you see as different from the way you typically do those things. And then we'll talk a little bit about that. So Hurston, could you please run the tape, and we'll be back together in a few minutes.
Good morning and happy Tuesday, everybody. We're talking about how to communicate your compensation with sellers. So before we start our adventure today, because I do think this is an adventure, I want to press one very important thing to all of us. This right here, communicating your value proposition. In essence, the experience you create for a buyer or seller when working with them in a transaction is the most important skill that you'll have today, tomorrow, the next day, and the next day. And if you start thinking about compensation and value, as they say, it's always in the eye of the beholder. And what does that mean? It's the words you say. It's how you say it. It's your physiology. It's your energy. Are you following the 7 keys to effective conversation? Did you properly do a med C so you understand what you're talking about? See, I'll start with the end in mind. In the end, we want to communicate our compensations to sellers so they pay us a full commission, and whatever that is to you, it is to you. Now, when people have questions about compensation, it's for one thing 90% of the time. It's they did not understand the exact value you're giving them, and compared to one broker to another, they're trying to figure out why one person charges more than the other. Pretty simple and straightforward. So there's that 1 out of 10 person who's a haggler, that's a discounter, that no matter what you give them will never be happy. And the goal is to learn your business in a way that 1 out of 10 person, you can just walk away. So let's get into how do we effectively communicate our compensation to sellers. Number one, we need to understand what we're doing before we can even tell them what we're doing with them. Now, what does that really mean? If you don't have a clear step-by-step, repeatable, predictable, scalable system, meaning repeatable, it's the same steps you do over and over and over again. Based on doing those same steps, these are the predictable outcomes. And scalable, you can scale this through as many people as possible because it's repeatable and it's predictable. So the first thing you have to do and be able to communicate your compensation and your value is understand what are your repeatable, predictable client experiences. So we're going to share our checklist with you. And essentially, this is what our end-to-end program is built on. It's all these things mapped out, done for you, email templates, scripts, and you can just take this and make it your own. Now, at the end of doing this, your clients, the prospects, should have a clear understanding of what you offer them. And if they don't see the value, you should also be okay saying, it's a business decision. Do you want to take a % less? Do you want to do it at a steep discount, or do you want to hold your value? Because what people don't think about in discounting is, if you discount it by 1% to them, what do you think they're going to tell all their friends? It's a 1% discount over and over and over again. And then you have some people that pay full price, some people that don't pay full price. And then it's this. You meet another person that's going to pay full price, and then you're challenged and you're worried. What happens if they talk to their friend that paid 1% less? And this is a challenge with discounting. So let me share my screen and we shall get started. All right, so if you look at our seller experience scorecard, how do we effectively communicate our value? Well, part of this is, and if I were all of you, I would first and foremost turn this in to a, hold on. All right, sorry about that. I wanted to make sure to actually share our most updated checklist with you, and this is directly from our program. So if you look at how we communicate this, I would take this and I'd want to turn it around to more of a client-facing document. So when you go through pre-qualifying, you're just talking about, I would like to really understand what your motivations are, what your expectations are, what your past disappointments are, your concerns. I'd want to go through the med-safe. And then I'd want to explain to them, after doing that, I make a clear documentation of all the things that you shared that are important to, so that I can prepare the conversation for the one that you want to have. Now, some people care about this and people won't care about this, but these are all the steps that go into delivering a great listing pitch and actually sharing your value. So when you go through this, you could look at the preparing section, you prepare everything. Then when you deliver the pitch, now this is where all the money is. Now, the first thing I'd want to do when I got there is I would review my client's medsafe. I would say, John, Jason, Bob, Tim, Jane, Julie, it's been great speaking with you, and I really appreciate the opportunity of partnering with you in selling your home. When we had last spoke, you had shared your motivations are blank. As a direct result, you're excited about happening blank. Your expectations of partnering with an agent are blank. Your past disappointments you'd like to avoid are blank and blank. And these are the concerns you have. I want to make sure that this is the things that are most important to you. And more importantly, has anything come to your mind over the last few nights you've had to sleep on it? And you want to ask them that, because that as time goes on, sometimes people think of new things, and that's fine. It is our job. Now, you'll want to understand how you go through price, marketing, and communication, and understanding what is important to them. Now, when you talk about pricing, marketing, and communication, how does that essentially work? Well, this is your entire experience here. For the pitch, after the listing sign, bringing the home to market, pre-launch. Now, when you have marketing calendars, open house lists, and you're able to show this to your clients in a very thoughtful way, the people start seeing and understanding the value you bring. Ongoing client communication, accepted offer escrow, closing time, post-closing. This is an entire end-to-end system. Now, let me show you, when you go through the pitch, how you want to communicate some of these things so that people see a direct value. So when we think about these three things, let's go through this now about pricing. Before going into pricing, you want to explain the keys to an effective partnership. And this is in our platform that you control, I control, no one controls. And remember, this is about aligning the seller in partnership. And when you walk through it, it's what the seller can control. And really, it identifies what everyone's role is in the transaction. So sellers control the price at which they put their home on the market, the condition that the home is available once we put it on the market, the accessibility, and more importantly, and lastly, the terms. You control the visual story the home gets told once the property is ready to be shared online. You get to control the marketing, advertising, and strategy and execution. You get to control the negotiation strategy once you have an offer. And lastly, you get to control the client experience through predictable communication. And what does no one control? World events, local economy, the stock market, the interest rate, and what other the prices other sellers are willing to accept for the price of their home. So ultimately, I outline there's a partnership. Then the next part, and how do we deliver value? You share the market versus talking about the market. And we've talked about this in other videos, but the essence is asking them questions and having them repeat back to you the answers. So you give them a chance to understand what you're saying, as opposed to a lecture, which is just going and going, going and going, and they don't understand anything. Now, when you get to marketing, this is the most important concept. It's perceived value versus actualized value. Perceived value is what we feel that we offer a client. Actualized value is what they feel they're getting. So the important part is creating your own marketing calendar. So your perceived value becomes actualized value. So there's pre-marketing, there's launch week, there's putting in key dates. These are all things that you're going to want to figure out. And even if you don't have it in a calendar, you can just put it into a branded PDF that you're able to share with them. Now, asking great questions is the key to success in this. So I would be asking the clients, have you seen any examples of photography that you love for other homes? Have you been looking at homes online? What's appealing about the marketing? Have you read any copy that finds a home more interesting than the other? What does that look like to you? You want to have them show their hand first. And as you're going through your pitch, you're going to want to use anchoring statements. If this was the type of marketing you did for your home, do you think it would attract the largest buyer pool? Would that help you get the best price? Essentially getting them to agree and get their buy-in on everything you're doing. Now, you'll want to be able to go through this in detail, and this will take a chunk of the presentation. Because outside of price, which is something that you don't control, there's two other aspects of this. There's marketing, which is highlighted here, and then there's communication. Now, you all have access to our communication plan, but a great communication plan has your communication method, how often you're going to communicate, what you're going to communicate, as well as your business hours. The reality is, the way that real estate works, it omits the principles of every single business almost in the world. Nothing is open 24/7. Our clients want structure and they want predictability. So you can use our written communication plan and just fill in the blanks. And remember, all of these things are done through framing, right? Sharing with someone based on their current belief system and values, how something works and what could relate. So if I took my cell phone here and I talked about if I talked about having my cell phone service, I would never bring it to a place where I didn't know what time it was open and closed, or hours of operation, if they had after hours appointments, if I was able to have an emergency number in case I need to get anything. And you quickly pivot it, right? If you don't want the experience for your phone, why would you want the period for your home? That experience for your home. So this summarizes at a high level, because there's a lot of stuff to get to, how to communicate your value proposition. So let me tie this all together. Number one, the best way to communicate your value proposition is by talking about the things that are only important to them. So if you understand what's important to another person, that's what you focus the conversation on, that's the quickest way for them to see value in you. Number two, it's perceived value versus actualized value. Don't tell me, show me. Show the people the examples, ask them how they would feel. Because in the end, if they hate all your marketing and they want you to do a bunch of different stuff, it's the wrong client. That's okay. Number three, show up with all of your plans in writing, a written marketing plan, a written communication plan. And this way your clients have an actual detailed account of what you're doing, when you're doing it, how you're doing it, and the results. Remember, repeatable, predictable, scalable. So these are your key methods and framework for communicating your compensation. Now we're going to kick it off to our coach, who's going to open up a discussion. And I encourage you to block some time in your calendar. Make sure that you start building out your framework. And I would practice this 1 hour per week. I would make that a must if you're working with sellers. Bye, everybody. And we'll see you in the next episode.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what we just heard. So a lot of pieces in there, a lot of items that he covers. I'm curious to hear from you. Just put into the chat, what's one thing that you heard in there that kind of stands out for you as different from the way you do things, or represents a different approach or a different tactical way of communicating. Let's put a few into the chat and see what's there. Just list one each, that's enough. I see, don't tell me, show me. Having written materials for a number of aspects. Setting up the seller correctly to see that it's a partnership. This word partnership is really different from saying, you're hiring me as your agent, right? When we're talking about, how to create an experience for the client, what we're talking about is defining the experience that the person will have and then delivering on it. And so for many people, the idea of saying I'm hiring a hired gun to come in and help me do something, that's one way to look at the relationship. But as a partnership, it actually opens up so much more possibility for you to deliver value both during the sale and, of course, after the sale. Some other stuff, communicate value with the clients with what's important to them. Absolutely. Having plans in writing, written, find out exactly what is most important to them, not you. Yes. Asking more questions, not a lecture. Focus on what's important to the client, having things written down. So a lot of people are catching on to the importance of having stuff written. The problem with just speaking your value is you're depending on the person to translate whatever it is you're saying into an awareness of what that means and what that looks like. And you know what? Not everybody's going to be able to do that. Sometimes a picture is worth 1,000 words. And if you show people what a marketing calendar looks like, or you show them what a communication plan could look like, even if it's just a sample, it gives them a much clearer picture of what they can get from you. From my point of view, it also makes it more tangible. When you hand something that's real to someone or show something that's real to someone, even if you show them a digital copy and you say, I'll send you a real copy later or whatever, then they're getting something in that moment that doesn't just disappear as soon as you're done talking about it. The other item here is ask, don't tell. So many of us fall into like performance mode. Like, I'm going to show you how knowledgeable I am. I'm going to show you that I've been doing this for 20 years. Boy, do I know the market as well as anybody out there. And I'm a pro's pro. We can talk about all those things. However, if we start simply talking about those things, then we're talking to an avatar of a potential client. In other words, many of us think about what it is we need to say to attract somebody to our particular services. But what we're doing is we're taking the average of all of our experience and thinking about what's worked well in the past for a lot of people. The problem is that, of course, each person is an individual. And so if you're going to come in and say, I want to talk about this, 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 and this, with no regard for what the person values, then there's going to be a gap between perceived value and actualized value. This is why the MED-C is such an important and useful framework for discussing things at the very beginning of the relationship. Can I just check on everybody's awareness of MED-C? Can you please put into the chat, yes, kind of, or no, as how well you understand MED-C? If you understand it perfectly, put in a yes. If you have no idea, really put in a no. And if you kind of get it, just put in kind of. Okay, mostly a lot of yeses. Great. Now let me ask a related question, and I'll go into it just for a minute because there's a few kind ofs in there. Let me just ask the next question. For all of you that know about MED-C, how many of you are using it with some regularity? Okay, got it. Yep, looks like some yeses, looks like some starting to, a game changer. Great. So here's the point, folks. The MED-C is one of the most efficient ways in terms of getting at what it is that the world looks like from your client's point of view. What you need to understand is what the world looks like from your client's point of view. Let's say, for example, that your client had a recent experience 3 years ago selling a house, and at that particular time, the agent never really kept him or her informed of what was going on. This person comes to you wanting to get that kind of communication that he or she didn't get last time. And if you don't understand that, then you might not touch on the thing that matters to him or her most. But by using the Med C, you can get right at what is on that person's mind, and then you can start to speak to that. You raise your chances of making that connection with that person 1,000 times by simply understanding what matters most to them. And so Med C is motivations. What is it you're most excited about making this move at this particular time? Expectations. What are your expectations of an agent or what an agent will do for you? That's a great question to ask because it lets you understand what they think they're going to get from you as an agent. And it may be on target. And in that case, you can reassure them, yep, that's exactly what I'm going to do for you. Or it may be way off target. And you say, you know what? And you have a chance to correct it. You know what? That's not what the most professional agents do. What you're going to get from me is X, Y, Z rather than what their expectations are. C, disappointments. What disappointments have they had in the past, either with previous real estate agents or any other person providing a service to them? That gives you a real insight into what they value. Maybe it's keeping them informed. Maybe it's being able to troubleshoot as the unanticipated situations come up. Maybe it's being able to think outside the box. Maybe it's really knowing the market instead of just kind of like claiming you know the market. Those are very different things. If you understand one of those based on their past experience, you can speak to that. And finally, concerns. What concerns do they have about this particular process, or what concerns do they have about going forward with you today? And so when you touch on those items, what you've suddenly been given is a very clear picture of what's going on in their head. And then you can respond to it. Someone asked in this morning's session, they said, should we do the Med C? If we're going to show somebody a house, should we show the house and then do the Med C and then other way around? I said, do the Med C as soon as you possibly can. Because the more you understand about where their head's at, the more you can frame the rest of the conversation to something there that matters to them. And he talked a lot about perceived value and actualized value. This is a huge gap that we see over and over again. Chirag and I coach many of you, and we co-facilitate the mastermind classes that we have. And in those particular cases, what we're seeing all the time is this gap between perceived value and actualized value. Perceived value is the value that we think we're offering to people, that we think they will value in us, our knowledge, our experience, our communication style, our negotiating skills, whatever. Actualized value is what they actually see and will take advantage of from us. And the bigger gap there is, the more likely you are to have an unsatisfied client, right? And so it's very important for you to understand what it is that your client values so that you can offer that. John, Med C is a way of communicating 4 things through people. Through initial conversations with people. Thanks for the link there, Herson. It stands for motivations, expectations, disappointments, concerns. Definitely check out that link that Herson just put in there. Let me ask you guys, what is the most difficult part of you communicating your value effectively to sellers? Where is it that you stumble, or you get hung up, or you see a barrier for yourself in doing this effectively? Put that into the chat, please. When sellers are not on the same page, using brevity, right? Remember yesterday we were talking about your communication needs to be clear, concise, and what were we talking about? Clear, concise. Oh my God, I'm having a brain fart here. Clear, concise, quantifiable. Thank you. Clear, concise, and quantifiable, of course. And so that clear and concise comes from you being clear in your own mind what your value is in many different aspects, and then being able to pull out that little piece and give it to that client at that time. And so it's not about like having a whole pitch that's a perfect pitch for everybody. It's about having a bunch of segments, kind of like a menu. And once you understand what the person values through the Med C conversation, then you can zero in on that. But to be able to do that with brevity and with impact, you need to be clear and concise. And so that's why Chirag keeps telling everybody, practice, practice, practice. Join an accountability group. Because the more times you do this, the better you'll get at doing that. Jeff says, not getting into explaining mode versus asking questions, right? Chirag talked about the difference between telling versus asking. And this is a huge piece. You may have heard him before say something like, the person who asks the questions controls the conversation. And that's correct. People are looking to you to have a useful conversation or dialogue about what matters in the selling of this house, even if it's the first conversation you have. And you want to deliver value by engaging them in the conversation in some way. And one of the best ways to do that is ask questions. So Chirag gave the example, for example, as an anchoring statement. He said, if you show them an example of good marketing, you say, do you think that if we marketed your house somewhat like this, it would give us a great, opportunity to attract the largest buyer pool or to get the best price for the house? If they say, yeah, I think it would, that's not just good information for you to know. You've had a bonding moment at that particular moment in time, assuming the person is not just, being gratuitous, right? Like they really mean it. Instead of saying, here's the marketing I think you should do, and here's the communication I think you should do, and here's the other, negotiating strategy I think we're going to have, right? That particular space that particular approach leaves no space for the other individual in the conversation, in the relationship at that moment. But remember, the very first conversation that you're having with anyone is an audition, right? What they're experiencing in you at that particular moment is some version of what they're going to get later. Maybe you've heard the expression, how it starts is how it goes. And so they're going to be comparing the experience that they have with you to the experience that they have with others. And this is a tremendous opportunity to differentiate yourself by nailing things like the Med C, by having a marketing plan that you can give them a sample of, to talk a little bit about communication and the importance of adapting communication to their particular needs and interests, and then having a sample plan to hand them. All this stuff is really, really important. And for them to be able to make the leap from this person has something to I want this person, that's where you need to demonstrate the value, right? If you just share stuff like, oh, I'm great at this, I'm great at that, I've been doing this for 20 years, tons of market knowledge, people love me, whatever it is, you've given them something, but you haven't given them the connecting experience where they say, I can work with this person. So asking questions does a lot of things for you. It not only helps you understand where their mind is on stuff, but it helps them connect to you personally. It helps them feel invested in the process. It gets them engaged with you in a way that probably many of the other people that they may be interviewing aren't. One other thing that Chirag mentioned, he talked about turning the client down because they're not right for you. Remember him saying that towards the end? He said, if the client is kind of not going to meet you on your terms, then basically the client's not right for you. How many of you have ever turned down a client at the beginning of a potential engagement? Just put a yes into the chat if you've done that. Right, got it. Yep, a number of you. So this is an important thing to think about, just as much as the person is interviewing you, you're interviewing them. And through a dialogue where you allow them to contribute to the conversation, more or less equally, something like that, it allows you to understand what they are expecting, what they're seeing, how they see their role in the relationship, and whether their expectations of you are reasonable to you. And if they're not reasonable, either discuss it and come to a different way of thinking about how you're going to work together, or run. Because, the cost to you of sticking with a client who's not going to do business with you on your terms is far more than simply letting the person walk out the door and using that time and energy to go find another client who's more amenable to your style. My very simple approach to qualifying clients is not about can they afford to pay the loan or anything like that. My perspective is very simple. Are they willing to work with me on my terms? That's it. If they want to call me at 2 a.m, no, thank you. Either we need to renegotiate that or they're out. If they have certain expectations that I'm going to be available to them at any time, or I'm going to provide certain information that I don't want to contribute something like that, then I'm not serving myself and my business by sticking around with them. As difficult as it is to find clients these days, there are other fish in the sea. It's a real challenge. Heidi says, I turn down buyers more than sellers. Okay, got it. There's a lot of people out there in the market today who may have an unrealistic expectation, whether they're a buyer or a seller, right? We're hearing that from a lot of you in a lot of markets. And if that's the case, okay, we all get to make a choice, right? Are we going to change our commission for somebody, or are we going to lower our standards in one particular way or another? We all make those choices. But if we're always doing that just to be able to hang on to the client, we're not serving ourselves. It looks like we're at about time. So really happy to be with everybody today. Sorry, Chirag couldn't be with us as he's on the road. Looking forward to seeing you all again soon. I do my calls Wednesday mornings at 9:30 Eastern. So if anybody wants to hop on those, would love to see you there. Otherwise, see you all here next Monday. Have a great week.